there, my name is Sixo, but more on that later, as now it's time for a brand new Toy of the Week video. And today we're taking a look at that bit of the Transformers franchise that simply everyone is talking about right now. It's the Unicron Trilogy. I know, right? It's like the land that time forgot, but I have every faith that its day will come. Have no fear. In any case, I'm here to shine a little spotlight on at least one part of the trilogy today by taking a look at...
Our worlds are in danger!
No, not that one, I'm afraid. Instead, we're focusing on the second series, otherwise known as Transformers Energon. Well, technically, as today's toy is actually the Japanese version, although I have to say I do find Takara's naming of the toy lines much easier to follow. I don't know, maybe it's because back in the day I was only ever really a casual fan of the UT, as the kids call it, but the Hasbro names always seem to require me to sit down and have a good old think about which is which. I mean look, for the first series it's all about the legend of the Minicons, right? Or as they're known in Japan, the Microns. Hence it's called Micron Legend. Except Hasbro went with Armada, which, fair enough, I see what they're going for with that one. Then you have the last series, which includes a force of Transformers coming together to save the galaxy. Hence in Japan it was called Galaxy Force. Hasbro, on the other hand, went with Cybertron, which I guess makes sense because Cybertron is in space? I don't know. Then you have today's focus, which I only ever really remember the Western name for on account of it not being one of the other two, whereas Takara again went for something a bit more on the nose with Superlink. You see, it's all about robots linking together, and I guess having to decide which of them is a top and which is a bottom.
Ooh la la!
In any case, it's very much Superlink that's the focus for today, and it's an important distinction as these toys all hail from an era when Takara and Hasbro would put out very different colour schemes. These days, it's all about the two companies having a unified approach and only ever putting out the one version of each toy between the two of them. And that somehow that's better for consumers and blah blah blah, except let's be honest, there's a little bit of snobbery inside all of us that misses the days when we could boast, oh, you have the Hasbro version, how lovely! Mine's from Takara! Anyway, I am joking, promise, but it has surprised me to see just how different the colour schemes from the two companies were at that time, with plenty of examples to show that Takara was going for a more cartoon-accurate flair on the whole. And today's toy is perhaps one of the best examples of that, as it's sporting an entirely different paint job to its Hasbro counterpart. So without further ado, this is Superlink Scorponok. Takara Superlink SD-05 Megazarak is the Japanese release of the toy more commonly known by Western audiences as Energon's Scorponok. It represents the hulking form of the Decepticon leader from his first appearance in the Unicron Trilogy, with the Takara version in particular being a close approximation for the accompanying animation. In his primary alternate form, Scorponok is a sizable tank-like construction crane, which just happens to vaguely resemble the look of a robotic scorpion of sorts. It does a great job at instantly recalling the overall appearance of the classic Scorponok design from Generation 1, while still managing to be something entirely new. It's very much a vehicular form in this interpretation, however, mostly signified by the cockpit section on top, complete with a smidge of translucent plastic for the windshield. There's also a set of imposing construction vehicle treads either side, and although they don't actually roll themselves, there is a small set of wheels underneath to help with that. Overall, this form is absolutely loaded with detail everywhere you look, making it one of the most interesting offerings I've seen from the Superlink line overall. That includes some incredible clever little touches such as the set of ladders either side of the cockpit, as well as some remarkably lifelike piston sections elsewhere. The green and gold colour scheme is a magnificent thing to behold for starters, with the smatterings of translucent yellow plastic offering up some decent highlights as well. That's also found on the rather deadly looking set of pincers on either claw, with each featuring a tiny bit of movement despite not really being a gimmick as such. Then there's a vicious set of what looks to be mandibles on the front of the vehicle mode, again boasting a limited amount of articulation for a spot of play value. Elsewhere, you can find numerous examples of other armament, not limited to a set of cannons either side of the main body, and a further use of that translucent yellow for a removable set near the cockpit. Then there's the striking crane arm, clearly intended to represent a scorpion's tail despite the presence of a hook protruding from the end. This tail also has a sting in the end though, as pulling back on the lever atop the arm will deploy yet another set of cannons, this time with a bit of pop-out action. In an interesting twist, both the top of the crane arm and one of the claws feature a surprise Minicon port, tying this toy very firmly into the previous Micron Legend line. Oh, and before I forget, there's a rather notorious sound effect gimmick in the tail too, which can be activated by a touch of a button should you really desire such a thing. Of course, the main thing to note here is the pair of rather massive claws, which feature multiple joints to allow you a bit of movement here and there. The biggest example is how both claws fold forward, thus allowing a set of missile launchers to be deployed and fired at the press of a button. Just don't take your eye out. The right claw then features a small but attractive spark crystal with a Decepticon symbol on it, again showing off this toy's exceptional attention to detail. Overall, I have a lot of nice things to say about this vehicle mode, as it manages to be at once a worthy homage to a classic character whilst retaining an identity all of its own. This toy does actually feature a second vehicle mode of sorts, as it's possible to unfold it into a jet mode. However, there is a known weak spot at the shoulders which is a frequent cause of breakage, and I'm afraid I have no desire to put it to the test on my copy. You'll just have to be satisfied with the main transformation then, which by itself is not such a complicated affair. In fact, everything unfurls essentially as you might expect, leaving you with a very striking robot form indeed. In this form, Scorponok instantly recalls the appearance of the Generation 1 iteration of the character, featuring all of the right proportions and cues to pay serious homage to the 1987 original. That said, he remains his own beast, and yet again features numerous elements that make this Superlink design worth celebrating all on its own. The first thing to note is that beautifully recreated Decepticon logo on his chest, adding a welcome dash of purple to the otherwise earthy colour scheme going on. Then there's the face sculpt, which is beyond terrific in how it captures the menacing grimace of the character. He's a very handsome devil indeed. In a further nod to the G1 design, there's even a small visor section which can be folded down over his eyes, again featuring more of that translucent plastic. Most of Scorponok's vehicle mode gimmicks come back into play here, including the tail weapons which make him appear suitably ready for battle at a moment's notice. And of course his claws now make up his hands, something that seems to have become a legal requirement for any Scorponok design these days, and can still deploy those missiles should you wish. As far as articulation goes, there's a surprising amount of joints that can be utilised if you go looking for them, and by the general standard of toys from the time, he proves to be a bit of a poser overall. If nothing else, he looks simply incredible standing stoically in a display, and never fails to catch the eye even from a sizable distance. It's amazing to me to see just what a brilliant job it does at bringing the classic Scorponok design up to date with all the right cues in place, just with a distinctly new twist. He also looks magnificent as part of a lineup of other Unicron Trilogy toys, holding his own against some potently colourful designs. It's also something to see just how close to the animation model this toy really comes, especially with that Takara paint scheme boasting a spot-on approximation of the cartoon colours. It means that you're in for a treat whichever version of the toy you're after, but if screen accuracy is a must for you, then the Superlink version is a no-brainer. That said, there have been many other paint jobs for this mould over the years, especially with it being used for two separate BotCon exclusives, including the classic Scorponok and the Action Master Elite character Double Punch. Really though, for Unicron Trilogy fans, this will surely be the ultimate iteration overall, representing a unique take on the character from a time in the Transformers franchise that was very special indeed. So, as I've mentioned before, it's been a real treat for me to go back and appreciate the Unicron Trilogy for what is really the first time, having only ever observed it from a distance all those years ago. And thus far, none of the toys I've encountered have really disappointed me in the least. Scorponok is again a prime example of that, as I've heard so much about what a fabulous rendition of the character it is, yet experiencing it firsthand has really been a revelation for me, and I particularly love how it's at once a very clear homage to the 1987 design of the original character, yet it's still somehow entirely its own thing, which, I don't know, somewhere along the line we've forgotten where that balance is. I mean, don't get me wrong, the current crop of new toys all look excellent, and I'm definitely excited to see stuff like Kingdom kicking out so much love for Beast Wars, no less. I guess maybe it'll be interesting if Generations or even Masterpiece finally does come back around to the Unicron Trilogy then, especially how they'll interpret those rather unique designs from the early 2000s with a bit of a modern twist. One thing's for sure though, whatever happens, I'll be here banging the drum for the original crop of toys, especially when they're as nice as Scorponok. Anyway, that's it for today, so a big thank you for watching, and don't forget to drop me a like if you enjoyed the video. Quick final shout out to all my Patreon supporters too, details of which are coming up at the end of the video. Otherwise, that's it from me, so enjoy the rest of your day. TTFN.